Welcome to Regional Digital Trade Integration Index Guidelines, RDTII. We will guide you through the three sections, which are Y on Digital Trade Regulation, Understanding RDTII and RDTII Pillars and Exercises. In this video, we will focus on the first and second sections. In the second video, we will focus on the third section. First, Y on Digital Trade Regulation. This first section will introduce you the relation between the digital trade and the RDTII. Digital trade is defined as digitally enabled transactions of trade in goods and services that can either be digitally or physically delivered, and that involve consumers, firms, and governments. Per this definition, there are largely four types of digital trade. Trade in e-commerce. Trade in digital goods, for example, media content. Trade in online services, for example, fintech and IT services, and cross-border investment in digital trade infrastructure, for example, telecommunications. Then, Y on Digital Trade Regulation. Digital trade can facilitate digital economy integration in the region. This, in turn, depends on the government's openness and harmonization of regulation on digital trade involving ICT products, digital goods, and online services, as well as trade intensity in each area of digital trade, access to internet and other infrastructure related to digital trade. The digital economy integration, in turn, will contribute to digital and sustainable regional integration. Then, Y on Openness and Harmonization of Digital Trade Regulation. The more open the regulation of digital trade in an economy is, and the more harmonized the regulation is in the region, the faster digital economy integration comes. The openness encourages competition by reducing regulatory barriers for cross-border trade. Competition will bring innovation in different sectors. This will, in turn, increase productivity. The regulatory harmonization increases interoperability of businesses in different regulatory environments. This will, in turn, reduce the cost of doing business in different economies, since the economies adopt similar regulations. More specifically, the regulatory openness introduces to customers and businesses ICT products, digital goods, online services, and digital trade infrastructure. The importing economy benefits from using these. This is called the first-order benefit of digital trade. This leads the economy to improve its own counterparts, and even develop new ones. This is called the second-order benefit. The second-order benefit makes an economy more sustainable than the first-order benefit in that it reduces reliance on imports and increases exports. The regulatory harmonization reduces costs largely in two areas: customs and data. First, customs. In e-commerce, products ordered online must clear customs. Harmonizing procedures and product standards at each customs in the region streamlines the trade in e-commerce and reduces the cost. Second, data. Data are integral for the provision of digital goods, online services, and even digital trade infrastructure. Specifically, business models in these areas of digital trade often implement data value chains. A data value chain offers efficient and smart business solutions for transactions. These transactions occur either within a business or between a business and its customers. Then, what does RDTII do? RDTII seeks to inform the openness and harmonization of the regulatory environment for digital trade in each economy in the Asia-Pacific region. The index identifies 11 regulatory areas as separate indicators for openness and similarity, so-called pillars. These 44 pillars consist of several detailed topics of regulation. These pillars, in turn, consist of several detailed topics of regulation, known as subpillars. In this manner, the RDTII will help to identify regulatory areas of each economy in the region that need reconsideration to boost the openness and similarity of digital trade. The index score for each economy is a proxy only for digital economy integration in terms of the openness and harmonization of a regulatory environment for digital trade. For some pillars, the openness or the similarity is represented by the degree to which a regulatory environment creates additional costs to foreign businesses. Heavy regulations create higher costs of compliance to firms in general, while regulatory deharmonization across economies would adversely affect firms that operate in more than one economy. The RDTII flags the regulations that increases the costs. For other pillars, however, the consideration of the openness or the harmonization is multifaceted. For example, in Pillar 7, Domestic Data Policies, the openness and harmonization of the data policies are represented not simply by costs alone that the policies incur against businesses, but by a subtle balancing of the interests of costs, data privacy, data protection, and cybersecurity. The RDTII provides evidence to support policymakers who need to make informed decisions on digital trade policy while balancing between economic and other policy objectives. The second section, Understanding RDTII. This section will provide the background and methodology of the RDTII as well as the potential challenges. The RDTII aims to promote regional regulatory harmonization for the digital economy integration to bring inclusive and sustainable development benefits to Asia and the Pacific. This is because digital economy integration requires lowering barriers and achieving greater regulatory harmonization with regional partners, as well as increasing intensity of ICT good trade flows, access to and use of online purchases, and levels of network openness. The RDTII focuses on economies in the Asia-Pacific region that are members and associated members of ESCAP. The current version of the RDTII database covers 22 economies: Australia, Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, China, Hong Kong, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Kazakhstan, Lao People's Democratic Republic, Malaysia, Nepal, New Zealand, Pakistan, the Philippines, the Republic of Korea, the Russian Federation, Singapore, Thailand, Turkey, Vanuatu, and Vietnam. For the methodology, RDTII is based on 11 thematic pillars. These 11 pillars cover 44 sub-pillars in total. Calculating a score of an economy requires 3 steps. 1. Apply a score for each sub-pillar. 2. Assign a weight for each sub-pillar within a pillar. 3. Give an equal weight for each pillar and calculate the average of the scores from the pillars to assign the RDTII score to the economy. First, scoring sub-pillars. RDTII aims to measure openness and harmonization of regulatory regimes in the region in terms of trade costs. For this, the score in each sub-pillar runs from 0, open and harmonized, to 1, heavily regulated or deharmonized. A score which is greater than 0 indicates one of the following. First, a measure implies a differential treatment between domestic and foreign providers of ICT goods, digital goods, or online services despite being in the same or similar circumstances. Second, a measure aims to achieve a non-economic objective, but ends up being trade distortive. A measure is trade distortive when it blocks or discourages businesses from digital trade in the regulating economy. Trade distortive measures sometimes affect not only foreign businesses, but also domestic businesses. Therefore, trade distortive does not always refer to distortion in international trade. Third, an economy fails to adopt a certain international agreement, legislation, or legal mechanism considered of significant importance for the development of digital trade. Also, from the third measure, when an economy does not adopt measures that contribute to development of digital trade. Examples of trade distortive measures are the following. A measure that requires both foreign and domestic entities bidding for public procurement to submit trade secrets, or to use a specific encryption standards, is trade distortive. This is because, while it serves to ensure cybersecurity, it discourages them to submit a bid due to the fear of technology transfer or additional costs for reconfiguration. Another example is that, a measure that does not allow public procurement bidding unless a bidding entity is a national of the regulating economy is trade distortive. This is because, while it serves the interest of protecting the domestic market, it blocks foreigners from participating in procurement. Examples of measures that contribute to development digital trade are the following. The WTO Information Technology Agreement and its expansion. The WTO Agreement on Government Procurement. The Doctrine of Fair Use. Legislation for Comprehensive Data Protection. Safe Harbor Provision for Internet Intermediaries. Legislation for Electronic Transactions and Signatures. Weighting sub-pillars. To generate a score from a pillar, the RDTII takes a weighted approach to the sub-pillars within each pillar. The reason is that, within a particular pillar there are measures that have a stronger effect in digital trade than others. For instance, an import ban blocks imports, while local content requirements do not block, but allow imports as long as foreign business are conformed with the domestic requirements. With the same weight on all sub-pillars, the index score can be unjustifiably high even when there is a number of measures that have a minimum effect on digital trade. Averaging scores from each pillar. While the RDTII applies unequal weights to the sub-pillars within each pillar, it applies an equal weight to each pillar. We just said that RDTII takes an unequal weighting approach to the sub-pillars. This is because it is possible to compare the trade restrictiveness of measures within the same pillar like comparing different measures related to domestic data policies. However, it is not as straightforward to compare the importance of different pillars. That's why we are taking an equal weighting approach to the pillars. For example, comparing domestic data policies versus tariffs and trade defense is difficult without empirical evidence on how much each pillar deepens the lack of digital economy integration. Sources for regulatory measures. Researchers must look at the official Gazette of laws, regulations, and other measures to find relevant information for each sub-pillar. Secondary sources such as official guidelines, official government reports and publications, and legal reviews serve only to guide researchers' attention to the primary sources. Researchers must cite only primary sources as the secondary sources serve only to guide researchers' attention to the primary sources. There are two potential challenges in finding relevant information. First, there may be a gap between what law says and how that law applies. Usually, this results from discretion in decision-making and implementation of regulation, and the lack of transparency on institutional structures. The second challenge is that fine-grained regulatory detail is not always available. To address this, researchers should dig deeper in the hierarchy of law from statute, regulations, decree, decision, and so on. For example, for the Republic of Korea, the hierarchy of legal instruments runs from acts to enforcement decrees, and then enforcement rules. The enforcement decrees and rules spell out in detail what acts mandate. Lastly, in the case that there is no measure relevant for a sub-pillar, please note the lack of measures for that sub-pillar. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.